Our first speaker this morning is Dr. Stephen Frank. He's a professor in the Department of Entomology at NC State University. He's also an extension specialist focused on the pests of trees and other landscape plants. He studies why urban plants have more insects than plants in natural areas and how to rectify this by encouraging beneficial insects and good planting practices. Dr. Steve Frank will teach us some common groups of plants, pest insects, and beneficials that eat them. That just sounds lovely, doesn't it? You'll also learn why to reduce pest outbreaks by putting plants in locations where they can thrive. And he'll discuss ways to encourage beneficial insects in your garden to help reduce pests. So please welcome our first speaker, Dr. Stephen Frank.
All right, thanks folks. Thanks for coming. It looks like they got the, good, clicker. Got the,
That is working. Arlene's presentation had some really weird settings. I thought I got rid of one or all of them, but there was a hiding one somewhere. I don't know where it is.
all right. So, there was a long list of things I was supposed to present to you, so I'm going to take the whole time. And you guys will get out of here by dinner. So this was when Chris asked me for a title, I was like, okay, how about just pests and beneficial insects in the garden? The way I like to think about this though, and how I sort of think about my garden and just being outdoors is as a safari, right? Because even though this is what got me into entomology, right? When I was a kid, I always watched the nature specials that came on. At that point, they were special. They only came on once in a while. You couldn't just watch them every single day on Netflix. And so I would wait for these to come on. And of course, there's all these animals and zebras, and these are all the herbivores, right? These things are the herbivores in the system, but what you really watch these shows for, here we go, is the predators, right? Nobody just wants to watch zebras graze. So I really got into this, of course, and I like to see animals eat other animals. And so this got me into nature generally, and then in college I realized that there was actually some usefulness to having predators eat herbivores, except really small predators eating really small herbivores. Okay, and so we generally don't have lions and crocodiles and stuff in our yards. I hear there is an emu running around somewhere. But in Raleigh, we've got some green space here, all right? Raleigh actually has about 50% canopy cover, a lot of green space. We're lucky and need to preserve that. Of course, we have a lot of other areas, but even these have a diversity of critters and plants in them. So, everyone worries about pests, and of course in any landscape there's lots of pests to think about. And, got ahead of myself here. And so I'm going to just talk about a couple. My program is picture rich, okay? And so we're going to talk about a couple general groups of insects, and then we'll talk about some of the predators and things. But the important thing that I like to get across is that on any given tree in your yard, you might focus on, there's these eastern tent caterpillars. But on that tree, there's probably 200 or 300 other kinds of insects. And it just takes some attention, and most of them, 99% of the insects on that tree or shrub or lawn are not harmful at all to the plant and are actually good for a variety of reasons. All right, I'm glad that's on my phone. All right, so beetles, You know, beetles are kind of the classic insect. If you ask a kid to draw a bug, probably is going to draw something that looks like a beetle. And so Japanese beetles you're familiar with. This is a flea beetle here on a hydrangea. We had a lot of these tulip poplar weevils this year. And there's millions of kinds of beetles, actually millions of kinds. Okay, so I can't possibly get into them all, but I just wanted to give you some of the common ones here. Caterpillars. Caterpillars are awesome, right? This is the orange striped oakworm. They're just finishing up this time of year. What do you think they eat? All right. Cankerworms, springtime pests. Here's the eastern tent caterpillar that everybody likes, and bagworms. These are some of the ugliest caterpillars you'll ever. I mean, look at this thing. It looks like it's from Lord of the Rings or something. But these are actually caterpillars. They live in these bags that they make, and they're super cool. All right, sawflies. These look like caterpillars, but they're not, and they have some unique behaviors, the way that they feed. There's all different ones. This is at the Arboretum. These are pine sawflies, and some rose sawflies, dogwood sawflies. Sawflies look like caterpillars, but they're not, and they're not flies either. They're actually wasps. And so the adults of these are wasps, or related to wasps in that order, and they produce these larvae that look like caterpillars. Okay, lace bugs. I heard somebody, everybody's got azaleas in Raleigh, and everybody has lace bugs on their azaleas. Part of the reason, and we'll get into this later, is how we plant azaleas oftentimes, and how we plant a lot of plants. I'll get into it now. If you go into the wild where azaleas grow, how are they growing? In a prairie out in the open field, or in the forest under a bunch of trees? Okay, so why do we plant them out in the yard? Like, we'll see some pictures, right? Out in the open. They don't like that, but the lace bugs really do. So there's lots of kinds of lace bugs. Here's azalea lace bug damage on an azalea, hawthorn lace bug, sycamore lace bug, oak lace bug. Entomologists aren't very creative. But it makes things easy. Wait till you hear some of the names of these diseases. You'll go nuts with that. So there's all kinds of lace bugs that you can find around here. Scale insects. This is my favorite. Okay, these are bumps on logs. Okay, here's one. There's one. There's one. And all these are. This is one of the ones I study. Scale insects feed on every kind of plant, has some kind of scale insect, and they produce this waxy cover. Here's euonymus scale. I bet you all have that. Not actually you, but your euonymus. and scale insects produce this hard cover, this waxy cover, and then the insect lives underneath that, and so it's protected by that outer shell. Very cool. All right, aphids. These are like the weakest. These are the weakest critters. These are the, I don't know, the gazelles or the whatever they eat. What's the easiest thing to catch on the prairie? I don't know. But these are just soft little guys. You've seen these probably. Okay. They're not, these are woolly ones on a beech tree. They're cool. This is on a milkweed, oleander aphids, rose aphids. So crepe myrtle aphids. You see the way that we do things. All right, now to the fun part. Again, nobody watches David Attenborough to see the gazelles. So we're going to talk about predators. Predators capture and consume more than one prey in their lifetime. This is important because when we talk about parasitoids, they have a different definition. That's probably all. I think that's the most text on any slide. So here we go. There's thousands of different predators in your landscape. Like I said, you can go to any tree, and if you take a plastic tray or a sheet of paper or something and just tap the branches into that tray, you'll be amazed at how many critters fall off. I'm amazed every time because you just can't believe how many things you catch. And so some of the predators, spiders are one of the most abundant. I mean, we study trees mostly in my lab, and we actually do this. We beat trees into trays, and the most common thing that we catch is spiders. There's tons and tons of spiders out there. This is a crab spider. Ground beetles, some of those actually live in trees. All these different things are out there eating herbivores. They eat each other, right? So that's like these guys, the lions and the hyenas eating each other. Okay, so everybody knows lady beetles, right? Okay. Here's one of our native lady beetles, these kind of pinkish ones. These are lady beetle eggs. If you see these on your plant, that's what lady beetle eggs look like. Just yellow. They're usually next to aphids. So this is a tulip poplar. If you have a tulip poplar, go out and look at it, especially in the spring. It'll start to get all these aphids on it early in the spring, and then all of a sudden you get ladybugs. This is a parasitoid pupa, and all these critters show up and eat those aphids. So here's some other, have you ever seen this lady beetle? This is called twice-stabbed lady beetle. That's our most creative name. And so they're very pretty. They eat aphids and scale insects and other things like that. This is, I don't know what this one's called. This is one I found in France a couple months ago with my daughter. And these are lady beetle larvae that look like mealybugs. Okay, so here's some aphids. This is tulip tree scale. Guess what it's on? Right? Okay, so tulip tree scale, and then these guys look, you're like, oh man, I got scales and mealybugs. No, you just have scales, and then these are some lady beetle larvae, a special kind that eat scales. Okay, so there's lots of kinds of lady beetles, not just the ones that drive you crazy and get in your house. Don't blame all the lady beetles. All right, so these, periodically in the spring, we have, this is a willow oak tree with lots of scale insects in it, one of the ones that we study, and then sometimes in spring you get so many of these lady beetle larvae, these cottony ones that look like mealybugs, they get all over the tree trunks. And then what happens? People go out and spray them because they think they're mealybugs. Yeah, that's bad news. So, anyways, mealybugs are a problem, but these guys are super cool. All right, my new pirate bugs, they're very tiny, okay? It's hard to get a picture of them, at least for me. I'm not a very good gardener, and I'm not a very good photographer. So that's why I talk about bugs. But here's what they are. They're like I say, they're very small. They're probably, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch. And then they have this sharp needle-like mouth part. They swing it out and they stab it in to aphids and caterpillars and things and suck out all their juices. All right, there's another one. That's good, right? Okay, green lacewings. This delicate thing, what could it possibly eat? Anybody seen these before? So, if you go out by your porch light, you'll probably see these. They look like this. And when you really get in there, they have golden eyes. They're really pretty golden eyes. You'll be able to see those. But But the real cool part of these is the larvae. Okay, so these aren't really predaceous, but they're larvae. They lay eggs that look like this. They're on this stalk. See how they're on that hair? The egg is way at the end. That's so that when they all hatch, they don't eat each other right away. They've got to work for it. And then here's the larvae. They've got these big pinching jaws that are hollow, and so they stab those into things and suck out all the juice. Okay, here's another, and you can find these eggs pretty easily. If again, it's one of those things you just have to, like, you just get down there and look, and especially if there's some aphids and things around, you just look at those leaves, you're going to see these, this is on an azalea, you'll see these eggs on there. And that's a good sign. Okay, here's another picture of these with their jaws. And then this one, there's a group of these that are called debris-carrying lacewings. And if you stand at an oak tree, most kind of trees, but I look at willow oaks a lot. That's what, well, actually, that's not what that is. But anyways, go stand at a willow oak, just because there's so many of them around here. And all of a sudden, you'll see a piece of lichen like this move. You'll think, oh man, I had too much coffee or something. And what this is a lacewing larvae like this, but as they go around, they take the bodies of their victims, and then they take pieces of lichen and moss, and they pile it on top of themselves, and they carry it around. That's why they're called debris carrying. Clever, right? And then they carry all that junk around to conceal themselves. Because insects have predators too, right? Even the predators have predators. All right, so those are neat. Here's one about to get this aphid on a tulip poplar. Hoverflies. So this and the lacewings and some of these others, it's important to realize that, you know, these hoverflies aren't, again, these aren't predaceous as adults. They eat pollen and nectar, things from flowers, but their larvae are predaceous. And so when you put flowers and things in your garden, you know, the popular thing now is to attract bees. But you're also, if you go out and look at those, you're also attracting hoverflies and regular flies and wasps and all kinds of things, great things besides bees. And a lot of the predators in your garden that help regulate the pests, the adults feed on nectar and pollen, and the larvae are predaceous. And so without flowers around, you also wouldn't have these predators around, because the adults, ladybugs eat pollen. I mean, ladybugs are predaceous as adults, but they also eat pollen. All right, so these are hoverflies. They look like bees, sort of. They have 2 wings instead of 4 wings. And there's lots and lots of these, big ones and little ones, and that you can find. Okay, here's some. I was at a farm in Indiana, and there was all this corn, Indiana, and there's so many hoverflies. I mean, they were just landing all over me. And so here's some on an old wooden bench. And then the larvae look like this. They just look, I mean, they're maggots, because these are flies, okay? The larvae of flies are maggots, and so here's a maggot that crawls around. They lay their eggs in next to where aphids are feeding, and then these maggots crawl around and eat the aphids. Okay, this is also on a tulip. Find a lot of stuff on tulip. But these are hard to get pictures of, so soak it up. That's the only one. Long-legged flies. These are predators, and they're just gorgeous. And these are everywhere. If you go in your garden and just stand, and this is on a rose bush in my yard, but just stand and look at any bush. Just look at it. And these shiny, golden, green, different colored iridescent flies are going to be landing all over the place. And they're predators of aphids and things like that. Everybody knows what spiders are. I don't know if those are those excited groans? No. All right, well, spiders, spiders, see, look, here's a spider eating a cankerworm. Who likes cankerworms? Spiders do. All right, so there you go. Spider eating a cankerworm. There's a big wolf spider on those live on the ground. Spider in a web, of course. Crab spider. This is a jumping spider. But there's lots and lots of spiders out there, and they don't bite people. Okay, none of these spiders are going to bite you. Black widows will bite you, brown recluse will bite you, but none of the other spiders that we have around here are at all harmful. So just enjoy them, and they're often very pretty. These are iridescent usually, these jumping spiders. I mean, how can you not enjoy them? Lovely, there we go. One convert. All right, so parasitoids. This is something, there's no real, there's nothing really like this in the African safari or the jungle. And what these do, parasitoids use other insects as hosts for oviposition and development. And these are pictures by my former student Adam Dale. And so what's happening here is this is a wasp. The important thing about wasps is that when you think of a wasp, or you ask a child to draw a wasp, they draw this big thing with a stinger and bzzz. 99% of all wasps. You know how big this thing is? It's about, it's smaller than a minute part bug. It's a 32nd of an inch. Most of the wasps in the world are like this, and very tiny, and parasitize other insects, and they don't sting people or other creatures. It's just a few of those that do, and those are good too. And I was driving over here, I forgot to put in a picture of a wasp eating a caterpillar. So I've got some of those, and people don't like wasps. I can understand that. But what wasps eat is caterpillars oftentimes, and other things like that. So they buzz around the trees, they see caterpillars, they get those. Sorry, I've been ignoring all you guys. I should switch sides, but I'm not as comfortable over there. So they catch caterpillars and they just chew them up. None of this delicate sucking out the juices like these others. They just chew them up, right? And so wasps are really good for those sorts of things. Okay. Oh, let me get back to this though. Here's a parasitoid. What's happening is it has an ovipositor, which you might think of as a stinger, and it puts its abdomen under, and it's laying an egg inside of that aphid. Okay, so it uses that, and again, this is how most wasps in the world make their living. They lay eggs in, or on other creatures, and then that egg develops and feeds on the innards of that creature while it's still alive, and then eventually, of course, it dies, and a new wasp emerges from that carcass. Okay? So, is that super cool? All right, so here's an action shot. Here's our wasp. It's getting ready. See it? Yeah, this is my student Adam Dale. He's actually a good photographer. He's at the University of Florida now. So here it is. It's laying its egg in that aphid. The aphid's like, what are you doing? And then it's over. And what happens is, this is called an aphid mummy. And if you go out on any of your plants that have aphids, which they all do, you can look around and find these. This is a regular aphid. It's soft and moving around, and this is an aphid mummy. It's brown and hardened. It looks like if aphids grew from seeds, this is what it would look like. I just thought of that. Okay. But they're brown and hardened, sort of like the color of a paper bag. And the parasitoid makes it form this hard coating, and it pupates inside of there. So that's the wasp cocoon. And then the wasp cuts a hole in there and climbs out when it's ready. Okay, so here's a parasitoid on a tulip poplar again. And here's a mummy of a tulip poplar aphid. This I just saw the other day. So the picture didn't turn out very well, I think, when I blew it up or something. But what's happening here, this is a fly instead of a wasp. Some flies are parasitoids also. And this is called a tachinid fly. And tachinid flies parasitize caterpillars. Some of them also parasitize beetles, like Japanese beetle larvae and things like that. And so I stood there for a while watching this fly lay eggs on the face of these caterpillars. These are yellow-necked caterpillars, and you look and see all those eggs on there. And so it just sits there, and when it gets the chance, this is their defensive posture, but for some reason they come back down when the fly is still there, and then it lays eggs on their face. And so those eggs will hatch, and the larvae will feed, and the caterpillar will die.
Do they normally lay them on their face, or was that just an opportune location?
This interaction, yes, they always lay them on their face. The body of the caterpillar is real hairy and you know, kind of messed up. The face is real smooth and a nice place to attach eggs. So.
Okay. Good to know.
Yep. They also can't groom their face very easily. And so, you know how you, like, you give your cat flea medicine on the back of its neck because it's like the only place it can't lick, right? And so flies and other things lay on beetle, you know, grubs and stuff will also lay on their faces, lay eggs on their faces, because anywhere else on their body they can detect them and chew them and remove them. Can't chew your own face, usually. All right, so here's Raleigh. This is our safari, right? We don't live in the Amazon jungle or somewhere where people typically think diversity lives, right? People think, oh, animal diversity is over there. It's in the Amazon. It's in the savanna. It's in the tall grass prairie or somewhere. But you have so many critters, thousands of species in your yard. They're just very, very small. Luckily, right? You really want all those creatures to be big? So that's what we've got. We've got all these interactions. You know, predators eating herbivores, predators eating predators, gentle herbivores just grazing on leaves. All that's happening in your yard. It's just at a very small scale. We even have predators in water eating things. There's things that live in there eating mosquito larvae and that sort of thing. All right, so we want all these. We want all these predators, even the spiders, in our landscape. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So how do we do that? Well, we want to conserve these, and why do we want to conserve natural enemies like these? Well, they're there all the time anyway, if we just help them out a little. They feed on pests, reduce pest outbreaks, that's good, and they're free, right? You don't have to go buy a bag of ladybugs, and don't do that, by the way. It doesn't help. It's better just to attract ladybugs and other things to your yard. When you let those ladybugs, when you open that bag, they all just fly away. Because they collect them from the Rocky Mountains. They hibernate in the Rocky Mountains in huge masses of ladybugs, and they go with big vacuums and they suck them up while they're hibernating, and then they put them in bags and sell them. And you know, what do bears do when they come out of hibernating? Well, they look for food, which is, you would think would be good, except those ladybugs are programmed, they've evolved to wake up from hibernation and just fly away because they're living on these rocky outcrops. Anyways, here we go. All right, so how do we conserve natural enemies? First, do no harm. Thought that said ham for a second. Do no harm, okay? So, you know, broad spectrum insecticide applications and things like this where you're spraying your landscape with insecticides. All these predators that we've talked about are insects except for spiders, but they're also susceptible to insecticides. And so the more frequently you're out there killing insects, the fewer of these predators that you will have. And this sort of activity actually can increase pest abundance, particularly my favorite creatures, the scale insects. And the reason is, remember we talked about these, this is a waxy cover and the insect lives underneath it there. And so these critters are waterproof. All right, they've got a waxy shell, spray them with your pesticide, it just runs off of them because they're waterproof. And then, but what you've done is made this plant, any of these plants, it didn't harm the scale insect, but now it's too toxic for their parasitoids and predators to crawl on, right? Because there's that residue on it. And so you actually get more scale insects when there's routine insecticide applications because you've created enemy-free space for them, right? There's not enough predators there, but you're not hurting the scale insects at all. All right. So, do no harm, and then, oh geez, look at all this. Enhance the habitat to attract and retain natural enemies and support their survival, reproduction, and I don't know what happened there. So, when we go from natural habitats, all right, you've got some natural area, lots of plant diversity. It looks natural, right? And there's lots of critters living there, and it's a wonderful place. And then as we go through this sort of change, you get fewer plants gradually, and fewer kinds of plants, and also fewer layers of plants, less structure, right? So you've got this, you know, somebody's dentist office or some crazy place, and it's got these azaleas here, and there's no overstory trees, there's no medium-sized trees, and things like that. So the closer we go towards a natural-looking situation, the better it is for predators and the worse it is for pests. All right, there's some more of our natural enemies. And so by providing a complex, we just call this generally habitat complexity, and that can include plant diversity, different layers and structures of plants. Just a more complex habitat supports more predators and parasitoids than a simple habitat, okay? And so part of the reason is predators need refuge from predators. And so birds and other things that eat spiders and eat lady beetles and that sort of thing, they can hide better if they have more nooks and crannies to hide them. And also, like we talked about, this is a cantharid beetle. Their larvae are predators, but they need flowers. A lot of the adults of these predators and parasitoids need nectar and pollen to flourish, okay? So, there's a couple ways you can very easily improve the habitat of your yard for predators. Let's go through these. Increase mowing. This is the easiest. Okay, nobody likes to mow their grass. And I don't even have grass, right? When we get the weed talk, I love weeds because it's the only thing that makes my yard green. It actually is. There's no grass. And that's fine with me, I don't care. But some people really like grass, and that's fine. But just by increasing the height of your grass, you know, this is sort of the recommended 2 to 3 inches compared to very low, less than an inch grass. It's amazing. When I was a master's student, I worked in turf, and if you go out and just poke around in that grass or use a vacuum to suck up insects out of that grass, there's lots and lots of things, ground beetles and spiders and all sorts of stuff living in this grass just by making it a little bit taller. Okay, and that means you have to mow less, and that means your lawn is healthier and uses less water and all kinds of other good benefits, right? You have less weeds because the grass is more competitive. So there's lots of benefits to mowing less and letting your grass grow a little bit higher and tolerating a few weeds, because what are weeds? Usually they're little flowering plants, okay, little mustards. Yes, sir?
So what height do you recommend?
Well, I would say 2 or 3 inches. I don't know. Whatever your HOA says is the maximum. And then join the board and increase it. So weeds are just little flowering mustards and clovers and all these things that predators like and also bees like. And so there's research that shows that just by reducing the frequency of mowing, these little plants have a chance to flower instead of always being cut off, and you increase the bees and things in your yard just by saving your precious time, right? Nobody lives forever. You want to mow every week? Didn't mean to get dark, but seriously, right? Don't be a hero. All right. So all these ground beetles and spiders love to live in the grass. Okay. And then increase habitat complexity, you know, and an easy way to think about this that my Ph.D. advisor talked about a lot is just think in terms of layers, because if you think of a forest, typical eastern deciduous forest, you have overstory trees, understory trees like dogwoods and things. Where do dogwoods like to live? Understory. Out in the blazing sun? No thanks, but that's where we put them. Azaleas, right, tucked back in here, happy as can be. You won't find many lace bugs on these azaleas. These will be loaded, okay? The lace bugs grow faster because it's hotter out there. The plant can't defend itself as well, and because it's not happy to be out in the sun. And so you get more pests on plants out in the sun, and especially plants that don't like to be in the sun, like azaleas and dogwoods and things like that. You get more pests because they're not planted in a place where they're happy. Okay, so this landscape has some turf, ground cover, a couple of shrubs. Not very complex. This one, look at all the goodness. Ground cover, low shrubs, high shrubs, understory trees, overstory trees. And so far more insect diversity. So, I mean, just in terms of conserving diversity of the planet, this is better, okay? And also in terms of reducing pests. You're gonna have far few pests on all of those plants in that yard compared to the other. Okay, so again, habitat complexity provides lots of benefits to predators. And it looks nicer, to me at least. Right? Some people don't like trees at all. For some reason, people move in. My neighborhood tends to have a lot of trees. It used to have even more. And people move in and cut them all down. I don't know why that is. But, so they can grow grass is the reason. And so this same strategy is used, we promote it in residential landscapes and things like that, but this is used even in agriculture. And so this is called a beetle bank. We don't use these in the US, but in Europe and New Zealand, they have these beetle banks where there's strips of flowers and tall grasses through the middle of agricultural fields that give the predators a place to live. And then the predators can live in there, they can reproduce in there, and instead of every year having to come from way back at the edge of the field, look how far that is. They're right in the middle of the field. Okay? So I did this just as an example on golf courses when I was a Wee Master's student. Not very complex, right? Probably the least complex landscape. And so I went out and I planted flowers on golf courses. And this got dangerous. When I was trying to sample and collect my data, these were on the edges of the golf course, which is what made it dangerous. If I'd actually been right in the middle, I probably would have been safe. Anybody a golfer? Okay, so that was bad. But what happened was I went out there at the crack of dawn or before every morning, and I counted spiders and beetles and things. And so here's one at the edge of a fairway. And I put these are cutworms. They're a golf course pest, and I would just pin them down with this pin through their last abdominal segment so that I could see how many got eaten. And this doesn't hurt at all, as long as you keep, you just have to keep your thumb out of the way. Okay, so we put these out there, and then we would come back the next day and see how many were eaten. Here's a spider eating a cutworm and a crab eating a cutworm. Many more of these were eaten when we had these conservation strips. The beetles would come out into the fairway, and the spiders would come out into the fairway and eat these caterpillars, where other parts of the fairway that we didn't have those, they did. Okay? And again, this is what it looks like in wintertime when you've got all these bunch grasses and things, and spiders and crab beetles and centipedes and all kinds of good stuff love to live and spend the winter in there. And so look at how nice that would be to spend the winter in compared to this. Right? Where would you want to spend the winter? All right, so in our yards, we can install different kinds of plants and more of them. That's kind of the essence. And as gardeners, we tend to like different kinds of plants and more of them, right? That's what we do. And so some kinds of plants attract a lot of different creatures. Sweet alyssum is one that, for whatever reason, it smells good, attracts lots of different things. Things in the carrot family, herbs, if you look at the flowers of those, they're just covered in little flies and bees and wasps and parasitoids, composites, bunch grasses, all these different things attract lots of predators and parasitoids. People are into native plants. Lots of native plants will attract this spotted mint, Monarda punctata. Look at that stuff. It's just loaded with insects. Now, lots of non-native plants also attract lots of insects. But if you're into natives, have at it. All right, and the trick is make sure, and this is, if you're into bees, cool. This is the same thing for bees. make sure something is blooming all the time, right? And so you don't have just a big burst in the spring and all the predators and parasitoids and bees all come to your yard and it's all great, and then the rest of the year there's not. Okay, and some folks at Michigan State put this together. This is native plants and their different bloom times and how many natural enemies they attract. So you can find that at Michigan State. So if you have something like this dentist office, you could spruce it up a little bit, you know? Put some flowers in there, maybe a couple trees, maybe just start over. Okay, so to conserve our natural enemies, we want to first do no harm, reduce negative effects of insecticides and other things, and increase the complexity and diversity of those habitats so that predators and bees and all the creatures have the things that they need. All right, with that, this is my website, Eco-IPM, that's ecology and IPM, and you can find out if you're interested in the work that we do, you can find it there, and extension resources are linked up there also.
So your slides will be there?
My slides won't be there, but apparently they're going to be on YouTube. So this is my 45 minutes of fame. No, it's got far more to worry about you. But those spiders will not hurt you whatsoever.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So you talked about creating a natural habitat and attracting the beneficials. So what do you do if you have a plant that is covered in bugs? And, you know, I do organic gardening, but it sounds like that actually could drive away the beneficials as well.
What could drive away the, I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Oh, right. So is there anything that you can use if you have a plant that is infested with bugs? Like there are organic products, some of them are systemic that just make the plant adapt to the bugs from what I understand?
Well, there's no systemic organic products. I mean, if you don't want to use a pesticide that's going to remain toxic to predators and things, there's insecticidal soaps and horticultural oils. Those are pretty much the go-to.
Yeah, there's supposed to be herb-based, like rosemary-based, if you water your plants with it, like we had a rose garden that had a bunch of pests on it, and we used that, and that seemed to work. But my question is, how does that impact the beneficial things with it?
It wouldn't.
Can you repeat the question, Steve? I don't know
Oh,
if the
sorry.
group over here is hearing.
So the question is, if you're trying not to use insecticides or practicing organic gardening, what can you do if you have plants that are covered in pests? And there's products like insecticidal soap and horticultural oil that can be used to get rid of aphids and lace bugs and things of that nature relatively effectively, and don't leave a toxic residue on your plants. You know, there are some other things out there, rosemary, scented products. Those aren't, if you water your plant with rosemary, it is not systemic. It will not go into the plant. But there are rosemary oils. Hmm?
The company that sells it claims it.
Well, I haven't collected data myself, but water systemic, maybe, who knows? But I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay.
But you can, if you have those pests, you know, you can use insecticidal soap or horticultural oil or something like that.
If I spray
neem oil or insecticide also to get rid of aphids. And a monarch lays eggs. I'm having terrible problems with aphids on my milkweeds. Will any of the residue from neem oil or from the soaps be toxic to the caterpillars?
Okay, so the question is about milkweeds and aphid, how to get rid of aphid on milkweed. So the milkweed aphid, the aphid on milkweed is an oleander aphid. Feeds on oleander and it feeds on milkweed. And that's just what it does. And so if you have milkweed, you're going to have this aphid. They don't really hurt the plants. They feed on there. It's just part of the milkweed system. And so the only way not to have those is just not to have. If you don't have milkweed, I promise you will not have that particular. And that really is the way. So if you don't want those, it'll be a constant battle. Now, about the monarchs. If there's monarch eggs or caterpillars on there that you don't see, and you spray that with your neem oil or whatever, you could damage those critters. Once it's dry, if a monarch lays its eggs on there, it should be fine.
That's what I was concerned about.
Yeah, but you got, I mean, actually, monarch eggs are pretty tiny, and so you would have to do a pretty thorough inspection. I would say just, those aphids are great. If you look at that aphid colony closely, all the predators that we talked about, hoverfly larvae, there's all these other flies, the larvae bite aphid knees and inject toxin that paralyzes them. And all that is going to be in that colony of aphids. They're hard to see, but those aphids are food for good things.
Okay.
Yes, sir, you've had your hand up.
What's your opinion of Roundup?
What's my opinion of Roundup?
Go ahead and take care of that now, Steve.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything for insects.
Well,
Ineffective for insects.
I don't have a strong opinion of Roundup. You know, it is what it is. It kills weeds, and if that's what you're trying to do, I guess that's the way to do it. That's
You were saying that arachnoids typically don't bite, but so something in my yard loves me, and it's usually the exposed area here. What kind of homeopathic or scent would you
not that
recommend?
kind of doctor, man.
But you mentioned rosemary, so is there, maybe tea tree, or are there other?
That you want to apply to yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, there's any number of internet things that claim to repel probably mosquitoes is what you have. I don't have any answer for that. Yes, ma'am. And then I'm going to this side. I looked at you guys the whole talk. Now I gotta.
Do you know any predators for the stinky bugs?
Predators for the stink bugs? No. There are a few, and there's some parasitoids that have been introduced for the stink bugs, and they really have they've really become less of a problem over the last few years. But in certain places, they're still. But yeah, no.
How about the mantis?
How about what?
The
Oh, the praying mantis. Praying mantis will eat anything. And so if a stink bug walked past one, it would probably eat it. They also eat hummingbirds. They'll eat anything, but they're not going to eat them. If you put a bunch of praying mantises in your attic, it won't help your stink bug. Oh, they're pretty big. You don't want to know. All right, this side. Yes, ma'am.
The dormant oils, like the neem oil and the
insecticidal soap, like Safer's or something, those are not gonna hurt the beneficial insects? Did I misunderstand?
No, I'm a scientist, so there's nuance in everything. But the horticultural oil and insecticidal soap, and there's a lot of reference to neem oil, which is, there's also just plain horticultural oil, which is less expensive and just as good. The neem concentration, which is a chemical called azadirachtin, in what you buy as neem oil is so low that it probably doesn't help. It's really the action of the oil that does most of the work. In any case, if you take one of those oils and spray it on one of these predators, you could damage them. But the good part is that once it dries, those oils and soaps they coat the insect, and insects breathe through pores in their body, and you essentially damage and suffocate the insect. That whatever insect you coat with oil will die. But once it dries on a leaf, it's totally non-toxic. And as opposed to pyrethroids, things like Talstar and pyrethrins that you might buy, you spray those on the leaf, and that leaf remains toxic for things to walk on for days or weeks or longer. And so that's the difference. The soap dries, and an hour after you spray it, something could walk on that leaf, and it's perfectly fine.
So those just kill what you put them on?
That's correct. Let me go to the back, and then we'll come. Yes, ma'am.
There seems to be either an egg or on the underside of a dogwood leaf. What would be your recommended identification source? Is there like really tiny black clusters underneath the dogwood leaf? What would be your recommended source of identification?
The internet. So there's lots of great insect books. There's a great book by a professor called Garden Insects by a professor out of Whitney Crenshaw out of Colorado. There's lots of great garden insect books if you want to actually hold a book, which is sometimes nice. The internet, of course. If you have severe insect or disease problems, not you, but your plants. Michael probably mentioned the insect and disease clinic. You can send in samples, and those problems can be addressed. You can also send photographs to the clinic, and they'll do their best to identify those. The blurrier, the better. Seems to be what people think. Yes, ma'am.
You had mentioned about keeping the milkweeds going to have aphids.
Yeah.
So my question is, will they kind of self-contain on that milkweed, or how far do I have to keep that from the things I don't want it on, like my roses? If I want the best of both worlds.
Those aphids only feed on milkweed. That's it. And oleander. So that's not an issue. Yes, ma'am.
When you're attacked by an eye or moth caterpillar, what's the best way to get poison?
When you are attacked by an eye or moth caterpillar, the question is, what's the best way to get rid of the poison from that, or I assume any other? Some caterpillars do have spines that will. I don't know about eyes specifically, but like saddleback caterpillars, and there are some that have spines, and if you touch those, you can get a rash or some pain. The best way to get rid of that, I have no idea. Just wait it out, I guess. But not to be flippant. Some people could be allergic and have some sort of anaphylactic response. So, pay attention to how you're feeling and whether you. Yeah. No, I crawled through a whole patch of saddleback caterpillars. Yeah, that was serious. Okay, my time is up.
Yep, I think that's a great way to end our.